Hey guys, thanks for coming. My name is Jake. Today I'm going to talk about how can we use async to rewrite a whole app. So I'm a mobile tech lead at REA, and before we look at this, how can we use async, and then I talk about what is this app and why I'm doing that. So here's some background of this thing. Here, about a year ago, and then I got a request from a publisher and asked me to write a book. So this lockdown day, we have fun to do. So I decided to write a book, and it took me 9 months. So this book including for 34 chapters, including how to build up a unified development environment and how to have a standard GitHub and Git flow, and on the other hand, we also show up how to build some common components like a design system, the buttons, all this stuff, and routing system is very important for an app, particularly for multiple teams work on the same app. Also, how to support some tiny things, but very important, like dynamic types, dark mode, and localization, all this stuff. And another chapter, I just talk about your app design and architecture, including BFF. It's similar to the API gateway, what Marco mentioned before, and how to use something like an MVVM to make the app easy to contribute, and using reactive data flow to make it unit text very easy, like what Ben mentioned, like an input output. So the last part is talking about like automation and using single command to manage all these certificates and profile, and how to distribute the app using CI/CD, and also after go live, how to optimize the app using analytics, watching, crash report, A/B testing, remote go, anything. Well, I'm not selling the book here because it's written in Chinese anyway. But to make this book very practical, and I decided to write an app. Okay. So I write an app called Moments, and open source as well. So you can look, if you're interested in look at the app on GitHub, and the app comes with everything. Usually the production app will have like a GitHub flow and like a branch management, and also come with a CI. So every time I push, and then they automatically build it, and also distribute to test file, also distribute to file-based app distribution, and also I have a design on Figma, anything, just like a production app but small version. So let me demo how this app looks like. And then I bring my simulator here, and I hope my machine can still working. Alrighty, before I run it, I just crash it. And you can see I have 3 different apps there. Actually, it's only one app, but have 3 different schemes and using different configurations. So something called debug, and debug version is like alpha, and also have the internal version for internal stakeholders like a product managers or someone like a QA, they can look at them, and also production version, which is App Store version. So I'm going to demo one of these. One is internal version, because internal version come with something called internal toggle. So we can turn on some feature and before we ship something. So this is the app, they call Moment. So the idea is from the WeChat Moment, and pretty much very genetic ideas. So it's like a timeline, and you can actually fade, you can dislike, something like that, and then you can follow someone, and so that pretty much this is the app. And at the end of, okay, I changed my slide. So at the end of this book, and I have a very, very like a bold idea. How should I do better, right? So at the end of the book, and then I decide to try to text out my architecture, and is it actually flexible enough or extendable enough? So I decide to queue. So I'm using, by the way, I'm using MVVM pattern, which is a model layer, view model layer, and view layer. And in the view layer, originally I'm using something UIKit, which is we use it for 10 years, and then I decided to use SwiftUI. So I replace it from UIKit to SwiftUI, and without changing any single line of code within the other layer. For example, view model, which including view model, report sheet, routing, tracking, networking, data store, and nothing has been changed except for the UI. So I try to approve the concept. I didn't know I can work it a lot, but it worked out, actually worked quite well. And then I'm going to show you the outcome of that. So which is, if I go on one of the internal toggle, right? So I can turn it on and basically I crash the app, start from scratch, and then I reopen the app again, and it will give us a Swift UI version, and then which is looks a little bit better than the UI kit version, and it comes with a lot of animations like this thing, like a parallax effect, and then comes with something like called new skeuomorphism design, like this thing, a slightly very silky button here and there, and it talked to the exactly same backend and only change the from the UI kit to the Swift UI. So I have this app, and then it demonstrate the book, and then this year, so like this year, 2 months ago, and then we all know about WWDC 21, and then I designed to learn something new, like async and away, which is within the Swift version 5.5. And I used to be a .NET developer like 10 years ago, might be more than that, and also a JavaScript developer, develop a lot Node.js stuff. I do like async a lot, and I use it a lot, and that's a very impacts me because I can use the best feature within my favorite language, which is Swift. So the best way I learn, I'm going to do something, which is implement my app in a new way, which is Swift 5.5 way. So I'm going to demonstrate the app to you guys. That's what I have done, which is different simulator. You can see there's a 15, iOS 15, and I can still show you the other one, which is the 14 one. So you think about this as Swift UI 1.0 or 2.0, whatever you call, I don't know how to call it. And this is Swift UI 3.0 probably. So pretty similar. Didn't take me long time, just like a three or 4 nights, something like that, night time, and then I re-implement it, and using totally rewrite from scratch. So you can see the very similar effort, but slightly I feel like the new one is actually better. And then you can see some experience. If I kill the app, right? I show you some experience. So I start the app again, which is Swift UI, the latest one. You can see spinners there, something like that, have a placeholder if it failed to load. And all this one is faster. So they're actually using the exactly same BFF, which is a backend system using GraphQL. So you can see this one slightly slower. I don't know why, but I feel like this one's slightly faster, something like that. So then I'm going to show you. I move all this simulator out for now, and I'm going to show you how I re-implement the exactly same app call moments. And the first thing is I'm going to walk you through the architecture. So every time we even write a small app, but I like to have some kind of architecture because they can help us to maintain the code easily. So I'm very have something like an MVVM pattern, because we use this pattern in our production app as well. And we can use the similar pattern on iOS and Android. And we also can have very clear data flow, and all the code, most of the code, without the UI part, we can unit text them, almost 100% cover them. And then so to write a new app, I start trying to follow similar pattern, but of course they have different. So if you look at the other one, the old implementation, I'm using like Arc Swift. And then every time I get a data, I just use observable or subject to publish it. And then, but in the new app, I designed to have zero dependency. I mean, zero third-party dependency. So I only use the Apple API, and I found out that actually is mature enough for me to use. So basically, in the model layer, I use something called encoder and encodable and decodable, which is a part of codable, depends on which direction. So I don't want to use just codable. I want to use encodable for one direction, and other direction is decodable. And it chat to the GraphQL BFF. It's the same BFF. Oh, by the way, I also open source the BFF as well. And then it comes with some contract things. So hopefully I don't easily break them because they have a schema. And I have a networking layer. So in the networking layer, there's a best place, I feel like. So because they come with I/O, so the best place to play with async and away. And after that, so I have something called repository. Repository is something like a single source of truth for the entire app. So to make it, to manage the states, the mutable states. So I use a new feature called actor. And then on top of that, there's a view model. So anything textable in the view model and prepare the data for the SwiftUI to display. And I use observable object, and here I use state object, something like that. I can walk you through the code, and then, but bear in mind, this is what I'm using. So you can see there's like a single line up and down. And then if you look at the code, I'm changing to Xcode, which is a beta version. It might crash in some time, but it's pretty mature and stable at that when I'm using it at that moment. And then if you look at something, so I have something called features, and then so that one app can have multiple features. In the future, we can have something check-in feature, whatever, or payment feature, something like that. So within one feature, I have a slightly more like an MVVM pattern. So if I look at from the bottom up, and then the model layer, which is the data. So the data, exactly presenting same as the BFF schema. So I have a BFF here using GraphQL, and the GraphQL dispose the contract, which is a schema. If we define the data type and the nullability, and then I pretty much match whatever the BFF schema give to us. So like something, if the title is nullable in the schema, and then I mark it optional, something like that. So, and I have a nested data. So basically, this data is pretty much matching to the UI. So because we call it BFF, because we try to make the BFF smart enough to talk to different backend system, whatever microservices, and then they prepare the data for the app, which is iOS platform or Android or web, to display correctly. So if you look at that, we have something called user details. We're presenting the top part, and then it has an ID, name, avatar, and background image. And we have something called moments, and then we can have multiple moments, and which is become an array. So the array will have data like this, and then they also have the moments have something like the avatar, the title, something like that, and then someone like it, and then we tap on it, so this array became changed. And then there's the data model, super simple. Anything is decodable because the data comes from the network, which is BFF. So let's one layer up. So when we start the app, the first thing is really to fetch the data, right? Fetch the data from the backend, and then the fetching is the moment by user ID. So basically, I make up a BFF request here, and the BFF request, they come with a schema, like this one here. They call query, actually not schema, the query. So it means ask the GraphQL backend, say what kind of data do I want. And if you look at that, they're also presenting the data here. So I want user details, I want moments, and you return as an array for me. And then I want the ID for the moments ID, like item ID, and also I want the name of the user, which is Taylor Swift, and the avatar is an open image for Taylor Swift, and the type currently I only support one image, and the title. So sometimes title is empty, and sometimes title is optional, right? So some title, and then created date. So I translate the created date to the pitching time, so make it more friendly, something like that. I can show you how to do it. Very easy, straightforward, and it's like it a lot, and then it's likes here. So I prepare this query, and then I do one request. So because I might have So many GraphQL requests, so I encapsulate something into a extension method. So let me show you guys, which is here. So which go on the something called foundation. I got something called API service, and I got an MT protocol, which is only providing function. And then if you look at that carefully, you might see something. I didn't use any third-party alarm modifier or AAF networking, nothing. I just use Apple's provided API, which is URL section. So to make it working, I'm using async and await. So the first thing is when I define a function, I have to define something called async. Simple enough. And then it means this function is asynchronous. And when I define an async, I can use some async API within the function. If I don't define that, it will become an error. And so if you look at that, we are using some async function here, calling the API the URL section. And if according to Apple's WWDC video, they said they re-implement all the APIs support two versions. One is synchronous version, one is async version with a similar signature, so we don't need to worry too much. And then we just use the old way we used to do, and then mark away in front, and then they will tell you actually this is async. I don't have to do any like a completion handler anymore within the input parameter, for example. So in this case, I'm using a way to call this function, and then it will do a request to BFF and return the data in tuple, which is the data and response. So simple enough. And then because it's throwable, so we have either to use try question mark to silence swapped error or try to refloat it. So I decided to not throw it, and then I decided to not allow. I want to refloat it, so that's why I have a throws in my signature of the function. So if that's failed, it will throw here, for example. And on the other hand, actually, I can do something. I can handle it by myself. For example, if I do the get the data, and then I try to decode the data to my domain object, which is I showed you before, which is this object. And then if it fails, and then I can also throw my like a more specific error, which is a error type elem, extend, confirm to this protocol, error protocol. So depends on how you do your error handling. This is a play around app. I haven't actually thought very deep on how to do error handling yet. So there's something I throw, something I didn't. I certainly found out you shouldn't be doing that. And you might see. So if I show you that again, if this is loading up the data, right? So but you can see I actually try to update the data as well. So if, for example, I like it, it will update the backend, the BFF. So how can I update the data? You might see in the networking layer, I have something called like updater. If you look at those two types side by side, they look almost exactly the same with different input parameters and with a slightly different, they call query or mutation. So in GraphQL, we have query to query data, we have mutation to update the data, we have subscription to broadcast data. So we just use something called mutation to try to update. And then on the other hand, GraphQL can also, even you update data, you can get the data back as a JSON. So there's something different from the RESTful API. We used to have a post and update data and don't get any data back, but or only get the status back, for example, 200. But on GraphQL, when you're updating data, you can also get the data back. So I exactly define same data structure, and then I will report the data to my UI. And then you can see anything is very similar, also calling this extension method to do the data request. So we already have some networking layer, and then on top of that, we have repo. So repository basically a single source of truth. So you can imagine our app, we might have multiple screen using the same data, or we might have different user. The user is updating the button like this one here, and on the other hand, the network request also requests the backend and sync the data. So basically, the repo is a single source of truth. It might end up some of the situation called race condition. So if we end up in a race condition, we might have something like, for example, unexpected bug, or some of the unexpected behavior, or sometimes even crash the app without any hint, because we have to reproduce it based on the user situation in a concurrent way. So how can we avoid those things? So Swift 5.5 gives us something called actor. So basically, you can see something like define something called actor instead of class or struct. So actor, technically, you can think about in syntax, that's very similar to a class. The actor is also reference type. And on the other hand, actor have some difference from the class. For example, actor, they don't support inheritance, so I don't even need to mark it final, but I used to mark something final. I don't want to seal it. I don't want someone can inherit from it anymore. And also, actor can handle all the requests. For example, a function call in a way, which is messaging instead of a memory. What's the difference between them? So if you think about it, it's a class. When I pass in data into a class, a function, and it will pass the memory. But on the other hand, when we use actor, it will pass in a message. And then actor, think about just like a receiver. So it receives message one by one and handle it in a way, avoiding the the mutation of the state. So using actor can help us to not write the code using log-based code to avoid like a concurrence. So it helps a lot because I feel like it's super straightforward. You can write your code like similar like what you did before for class, but you mark it actor and then automatically get the benefit of that, and then without writing logs. And it made your code this existing pattern, but get the benefit of it, which is great. So if you look at that here, so we have two functions within the actor. One is called get moment, which is that when I start the app, I get moments. Another one is simple enough called update like. So when I hit the button, it will, okay, sorry, maybe I broke myself here. So I hit the button and then you will call this function, and then you can see all those functions, they are all async away. And they also flow if there's any error. So on top of that, remember there's a single source of truth, but it means there's a multiple caller or multiple consumer can use it. One of the consumer is called view model. So why instead of I just directly using view, and the reason I introduced view model because we can fully unit text view model, and it's very difficult to text a view. So I like to have a view model always to convert the model data to a render ready data, which is a UI render ready data using view model. So in this case, I have a view model called moments timeline view model, which is presenting the entire screen. And then within that, I have a repository, which is we just mentioned before, it's an actor. And then when we try to load up the data, we just go to the repository, and the repository will figure out the data for us. Either go to network, which is our BFF, or go to the local storage, for example, like a user default or core data or whatever magic they do, and then return the data to the view model. And then we do the manipulating within the view model layer. So because we are displaying two different types of data, one is the user profile, the other one is moments item. So I have two different sub-view models doing that. And then you can see the profile one. So if you can see the profile one is super, okay, I bring it like this. And then you can see a profile one pretty much mapping whatever from the model, which is from the BFF, to the UI ready data, which, for example, we have an ID, you always have an ID, do something like an identifiable, then we can use in a for each in the SwiftUI. And also we have a name to display, which is here. So we get it from BFF and plug it in the name. And also we convert. So you think about the BFF, they return primitive types, which is string. So I just convert it into a URL. It's variable though, so that's why that's optional. And then also convert the background image to a background image URL, which is display ready data. So that's how I use view model. And on the other hand, there is another view model. It's a little bit more complicated because there's more data need to convert. So for example, this one is presenting one moment item. So it has an avatar URL, blah, blah, blah. That's so simple. But we also have something, we try to convert the time into something like a more human vendor readable time. For example, 6 minutes ago. So what I did is I passing in the even a dependence anything inject, because that can help me to unit text everything. So I even pass in the now. So in the actual implementation, we just return current time, and I also passing in the relative data datetime formatter. So which you also can dependence inject when we do unit text, and then it will help us to not end up some time zoom issue, for example. And then you can see this function is fully testable, and also the view model will provide some functions, so actions we can do. And then for example, in this view model, we provide something called like and like. So when we do like and like, we call in this the single source of truth, which is REPL again, using the async away way. So, but you might notice something called main actor, right? What's main actor for? So main actor basically annotation to describe this function or this type. You can make a main actor on top of the class instead of a function. But I try to make it as small as possible, and then let the other part run on whatever queue they are. So let's talk about this thing, because we are using an actor. So when I do a request within the repo, they will dispatch to another queue. It probably is a background queue. And then if something happened in the background queue, and once I get the data finishes, for example, getting the 9:53, and then when I try to do an update to the UI, for example, 9:54, you can see likes, which is a publish property here. So if I update this likes, it means there's an object wrapper for the publish, and then it will update the SwiftUI. If we don't do it, we don't do a main actor, and then it will update in the background thread. It will either crash your app, but actually Xcode in this here, they will tell you, oh, you try to update the UI using a background thread, something like that, to help us to find out the problem. So the easy way, one way is we can use something like a dispatch queue.main.async to dispatch the execution back to the main queue. On the other hand, we can do something simpler and what Swift 5.5 provided to us, which is called main actor. So we mark it main actor, and then automatically we'll dispatch back to the main queue. And then this peace of mind, we can do our code like a synchronous way, as we used to do, and then remove all the headache to think about how can we dispatch, where should we dispatch, all this stuff. And then let's move on to the top part, which is the UI part. So you can see here is the UI, and then the UI timeline view pretty much presenting this UI. And then we have a scorer view, and then we have items. So it means we can plug in any kind of item in future, and like usually like a Twitter or Facebook feed or something, the other similar thing. I got a message, sorry, might be over time. Yeah. Sorry. Let's continue. So basically you can see I have a timeline view, and then within the timeline view I have a repeatable item. That's why I make some of the view model, they are identifiable because I want to put them in the for each. So that's they need to have an ID. And within that, so I try to display item, generic item. But you think about SwiftUI, any view, they are a protocol. So you cannot have an inheritance or something called polymorphism. So what I did, just like I have a generic view, which is here. So I go there. And then that generic view will detect what kind of view model it is. And then it will display the view for us, right? So if there's a user profile view model, I try to display user profile view. Otherwise, I display a moment item view, for example. So simple enough, I have a user profile view here, right? So I'm going to show you some of these things. How can we do this like a quite slicky animation? Very straightforward. So I have a view model. Pretty much I have the data I can display, and then you can see I make vstack, whatever stack, and then you can see this item floating on the screen, like my name, my avatar URL. And one thing I try to mention is the async image, which is, you can see there's a new API. In my old app, I use Kingfisher to display the image. And then this time I don't even have any third-party dependency anymore because Apple's so generous to provide all the components I need. And then you can see here async image, and then we can customize it, even have a progress view. So you can see if the image is loading, we can got the spinner here. Sometimes it's too fast, sometimes you can't see, but just pretty much you can see the spinner here, might be streaming a little bit slow. And if something failed, it will get a red, but you better to do it better. So get a red here. And then once we get the message, and then we can display it using normal way to the SwiftUI components. And then I show you how you can do this like a parallels thing here, right? So there's something called, I put two background here. The first one is I got a blob. The blob thing is we go to the exact thing here. It's just a random shape here. But once I put those two blobs there, and then I put some offset and put some rotation effect, and it looks quite shiny for me. And then I got another image, background image, and then you can see those things floating around. And when I drag in it, so I have a state, which is state. When I drag in it, I just change the scale effect, from 90% to 100%, something like that. Also have some notation 3Ds, and then it will give you some nice animation here. That is how we do that. Super easy. And in terms of do it in UI kit, it takes a lot more longer for me. That is how we done this animation, and I'm going to show you the last bit, which is the moments item. The moments item, I implement this thing here. It's like a silky button here, right? So in UI kit, we might need to implement the entire thing for ourselves, but in SwiftUI, it's much easier because we have something called toggle. So if you look at this toggle, and then within your toggle, you can specify your style for the toggle. So it's like a toggle style. That is my implementation here. Just up there. So you can bring it to a separate component, but for me it's super straightforward. So within the toggle, there's a button here, and there's some background color. That's it. The background color based on your highlight state. The background color also implement here, which is some gradient color. And then when I press them, and they have a small, like a silky animation. And pretty much pretty much that is how I implement this app, but the presentation is not finished yet. So, okay. Yeah, host John couldn't cut me off. And most important part for tonight, we are hiring. So we are hiring iOS, Android, lead dev, different level, senior, mid-level, whatever. If you're mobile dev, feel free to contact me if you're interested. And we are one of the Australia best workplace to work for. Actually, we are the #1 in the local company. We are #4 in that kind of best workplace, but the top 3, they are all international companies. So we are #1 in Australia. And we have a very great team. I'm very proud of them with diversity. So you can see we have different gender, different accent you already listened to, and different culture background, anything, different expertise, Android, iOS, some companies, backend, BFF, something like that. So we have a very good mixed team together, and we work on all the iOS and all the IA apps, including real estate.com.au, Real Commercial, and Ignite apps. We work across iOS, Android, and BFF. So we don't call someone iOS dev, Android dev, or BFF dev. You can see anyone mobile devs. We work on many products. If you join this team, you work on half of the mobile product in IA. And something made us special. We have something called CI Friday, Continuous Improvement Friday. It means you can use 1 day a week to whatever you like to improve our developer experience, optimize the process, and enhance user experience. So, which is the end of the talk. And if you're interested, find me in the Slack, or you can go to my GitHub and you find my details there. I don't use LinkedIn that much, so if someone connect me, I might take a month to get a accepted connection. But if you go to GitHub, you find my detail. You can directly chat with me by email, or email my email. If you're interested in the app that I showed you before, which is the link here. And thanks for coming. And I'm going to hand back over to Sean and unshare